At the dawn of the 20th century, the world buzzed with the possibilities of electricity and innovation. Railroads spanned continents, telegraphs tapped out urgent messages across wires, and telephones began to shrink distances by carrying voices from room to room and town to town. Yet, for all these marvels, the idea of sending moving pictures, images dancing through the air from one place to another, remained tantalizingly out of reach. Still, the seeds of what would become television had already been planted in the inventive minds of scientists, engineers, and dreamers across the globe. The path to television's birth was anything but straight. Instead, it wove through decades of experimentation, flashes of insight, and a chorus of rival inventors working in parallel, sometimes separated by continents, but united by ambition. To understand how television came into being, we must step back to the late 19th century, when thinkers first dared to imagine the electrical transmission of images. In 1900, at the Paris International Congress of Electricity, Russian scientist Konstantin Persky introduced a new word to the world: television. This term, combining the Greek for far and the Latin for seeing, captured the growing aspiration not just to hear or read about distant happenings, but to witness them with one's own eyes. Persky's coinage did not emerge in a vacuum. For decades, inventors had been probing the boundaries of what could be sent over wires. Long before Persky, the telegraph pioneered by Samuel Morse in the 1830s and 1840s had already shown that information could travel great distances at the speed of electricity. The telephone, brought to life by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, transformed the invisible into the audible, transmitting the spoken word. Meanwhile, in that same year, George Carey wondered whether selenium, a material sensitive to light, might be harnessed to create a camera capable of sending images, not just sounds. These early ideas, while not leading to a working television, laid crucial theoretical groundwork. Facsimile transmission systems also hinted at a possible future. Alexander Bain and Giovanni Caselli experimented with sending images over wires, resulting in early fax-like devices. While these systems could only transmit still images in a cumbersome manner, they demonstrated that visual information could, in principle, travel electrically. A major breakthrough came in 1884, when a young German inventor named Paul Nipkow devised what he called the electric telescope. His invention, now known as the Nipkow disc, was a spinning disc punctured with carefully arranged holes. As it rotated, the disc scanned an image in lines, breaking it down into a sequence that could, theoretically, be sent electronically and reassembled elsewhere. This principle of mechanical scanning became the foundation of early television. The Nipkow disc's simplicity and ingenuity inspired inventors worldwide, although the mechanical approach would later be replaced by electronic systems. Progress in understanding how light and electricity interacted was not confined to one country. By 1900, scientists in France, Germany, Russia, Hungary, and the United States were all exploring how photosensitive chemicals and electrical currents might work together to transmit images. It was a time of intense creativity, with inventors borrowing from and building upon each other's ideas, sometimes knowingly, sometimes by coincidence. Even as mechanical schemes captured imaginations, the invention of the cathode ray tube, spelled CRT, by Carl Ferdinand Braun in 1897 quietly set the stage for a new era. The cathode ray tube would become the heart of electronic television, a device capable not just of displaying transmitted images, but of doing so with a clarity and speed mechanical systems struggled to match. The groundwork for a revolution was being laid piece by piece. The first true steps toward television as we know it were taken in the 1920s. In the United Kingdom, John Logie Baird emerged as a pioneer of mechanical television. Baird's ingenuity led to the first public demonstration of moving visuals in 1925. Using a system built around a modified Nipkow disc, Baird managed to transmit images that, though ghostly and flickering, captured the imagination of all who witnessed them. This was not a solitary pursuit. In the United States, Charles Francis Jenkins was making strides of his own with his radiovision system, while in Japan, Kenjiro Takeyanagi was successfully experimenting with electronic image transmission in 1926. Each of these inventors contributed unique solutions to the shared challenge of turning fleeting visions into stable, recognizable pictures. The leap from mechanical to electronic television was not inevitable, but it proved transformative. In the United States, a teenager named Philo Farnsworth conceived a bold idea. What if an image could be dissected electronically, line by line, and reconstructed at the other end? Farnsworth's image dissector tube, developed in the late 1920s, turned this vision into reality. By 1927 and 1928, he was able to demonstrate the electronic transmission of images, marking a turning point in the history of television. Around the same time, Vladimir Zworykin, working independently, was refining his own approach to electronic television. By 1929, Zworykin had developed a practical system for both sending and receiving images electronically. These breakthroughs, emerging almost simultaneously, signaled the end of the mechanical era and the dawn of all electronic television. The world took notice. Experimental television broadcasts began to flicker into existence during the late 1920s and 1930s. In 1928, American audiences caught a glimpse of The Queen's Messenger, an experimental broadcast that hinted at the narrative possibilities of the new medium. Across the Atlantic, Germany established the first special-purpose television station in 1935, while the British Broadcasting Corporation in Britain began regular mechanical television broadcasts as early as 1932. The medium's potential for real-time coverage became dramatically evident in 1937 when the British Broadcasting Corporation's cameras brought the coronation of King George VI into living rooms and public spaces, a live journalistic event unlike any seen before. As television matured, the need for regulation became apparent. In the United States, the Communications Act of 1934 established federal oversight of the airwaves. The newly formed Federal Communications Commission was tasked with ensuring that television served the public interest, a concept that would shape programming and industry practices for decades. Other countries, including the United Kingdom and Germany, adopted their own regulatory frameworks, sometimes emphasizing public service, sometimes focusing on technical standards. The arrival of commercial television sets signaled a new phase. In the late 1930s, the first sets became available to the public, though their price put them beyond the reach of many households. Alan B. Dumont, an American engineer and entrepreneur, placed the first fully electronic television sets on the market in 1939, offering a glimpse of a future in which moving images would be as common in the home as the radio or the telephone. But just as television seemed poised to leap into the mainstream, history intervened. The outbreak of World War II halted much of the industry's progress. Resources and attention were diverted to the war effort, and television's advance slowed. Yet, even during this hiatus, the foundation had been laid. When peace returned, so too did innovation, this time with even greater momentum. Post-war advances swept away the last vestiges of mechanical systems in favor of all electronic methods. The rapid expansion of television as a mass medium followed, its reach and influence growing with astonishing speed. Throughout this period, the question of how to fund television's growth and development loomed large. Different countries experimented with various models, advertising, which would come to dominate in the United States, government subsidies and license fees, which played a significant role in places like the United Kingdom, and, in some cases, subscription-based approaches. Each model reflected the social and political context in which television was taking root, influencing not just who could access the new medium, but also what kind of programming would be available. Looking back, it is clear that the birth of television was not the work of a single inventor or a single nation. It was a global endeavor, shaped by countless hands and minds, each adding a piece to the puzzle. The process was as much about theoretical insight and scientific discovery as it was about practical engineering and the persistent pursuit of workable solutions. Where one inventor left off, another picked up the thread. The result was a medium that, within a few short decades, would transform the way people experienced the world, bringing distant events into homes, collapsing the boundaries of time and space, and weaving itself into the fabric of daily life. Today, the story of television's origins serves as a reminder that innovation often springs from collaboration, competition, and the relentless curiosity to see what lies just beyond the horizon. The journey from the first crude scanning discs to the glow of electronic screens was long and uncertain, marked by setbacks and unexpected turns. Yet, with each experiment and breakthrough, the dream of seeing across distance became a little more real, until, at last, it flickered to life in living rooms around the world. Television's birth was not a single moment, but a series of sparks that, together, kindled a revolution in how humanity sees itself and its world. As the dust of World War II settled and the world looked hopefully toward a new era, something extraordinary was unfolding in living rooms across America. A glowing box, once a rare curiosity, was quickly becoming a fixture of daily life. Television, in the late 1940s and 1950s, was not just a new gadget, it was a phenomenon reshaping the very fabric of society. The story of television's golden age is not merely about technical progress, but about the profound ways this medium changed how people saw themselves, their communities, their leaders, and the wider world. At the start of this era, only a small fraction of American homes owned a television. But almost overnight, television sets began to multiply. In 1948, roughly 2% of households had one. By 1960, nearly 90% did. The speed of this adoption was breathtaking, and its effects ran deep. Suddenly, the living room was centered around a new hearth. Not the fireplace of old, but the flickering screen that drew families together each evening. Shared viewing became a ritual, forging a sense of connection not only within households, but across the entire nation. For the first time, millions could witness the same events as they happened, whether it was a presidential inauguration, a championship game, or breaking news. Television's ability to foster collective experience was unprecedented, knitting together a vast and diverse country with a common thread of images and sounds. This period, often called the Golden Age of television, stretched from the late 1940s into the early 1960s and was a time of remarkable creativity and experimentation. The excitement of live broadcast infused the medium with immediacy and unpredictability. Anthology dramas flourished, bringing adaptations of classic literature and newly written plays into the home. Productions were often staged live, with actors and directors navigating the technical challenges of performing for an audience they would never see, but who felt intimately present all the same. Many of Hollywood's future stars and esteemed directors got their start in this crucible of live television, honing their craft before a nation of viewers. Alongside these dramas, a new generation of programs emerged to define television's unique voice. I Love Lucy became more than a situation comedy. It was a cultural touchstone, pioneering techniques like the multi-camera setup and filmed episodes that would become industry standards. Children's shows such as Howdy Doody captured the imaginations of the youngest viewers, while programs like Dragnet brought new realism to crime drama. Texaco Star Theater and its charismatic host, Milton Berle, became appointment viewing, earning Berle the nickname Mr. Television for his ability to draw audiences week after week. As genres multiplied, so did their influence on American culture. Sitcoms, westerns, and televised theater each carved out their own niches, reflecting and shaping the aspirations, anxieties, and values of the age. Comedies like Leave It to Beaver and The Donna Reed Show offered idealized visions of family life, presenting tidy homes, respectful children, and wise, gentle parents. These programs promoted a particular version of domestic bliss, one that resonated with millions, but also subtly reinforced prevailing social norms. For many viewers, these shows set the standard for what a normal family should look like, how parents should behave, and what roles were appropriate for men, women, and children. Yet television was not only a mirror, it was also a stage on which the nation's dramas played out in real time. Politics, once conducted in the pages of newspapers or on the crackling airwaves of radio, became a visual spectacle. Televised debates, most famously the contest between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, allowed the public to judge not just the words, but the demeanor and presence of their leaders. Campaign advertising took on a new dimension as candidates harnessed the power of moving images to win hearts and minds. Congressional hearings, once obscure affairs, unfolded before a mass audience, making the workings of government more visible and sometimes more dramatic than ever before. Television's reach extended even further, helping to forge a truly national culture. Publications like TV Guide soared in popularity, becoming the most widely read periodical in the country. The phrase, water cooler moment, entered the lexicon, capturing how television shows gave people something in common to talk about, whether at work, at school, or around the dinner table. This shared experience had a unifying effect, smoothing out some of the regional differences that had long marked American life. But even as television brought people together, it also revealed and sometimes reinforced the divisions that existed beneath the surface. Early programming, in its quest to appeal to the broadest possible audience, often centered on the experiences of white, middle-class families. Minority groups were rarely visible, and when they did appear, it was frequently in stereotypical roles that reinforced existing prejudices rather than challenging them. This absence was not accidental. It reflected the industry's calculation of what would sell and what audiences would accept. The result was a vision of America that was both powerful and incomplete, shaping perceptions of race, class, and gender in ways that would echo for decades. The influence of television extended beyond the content of its programs. Advertising, which became an integral part of the television experience, played a major role in transforming American consumer culture. Commercials and product placements wove a tapestry of desires, linking everyday products to the lifestyles and aspirations depicted on screen. Viewers were encouraged not just to watch, but to buy, to see themselves in the shiny cars, sparkling kitchens, and fashionable clothes paraded before them. The rhythms of daily life, from mealtimes to shopping habits, began to shift in response to the patterns set by television programming and advertising. Not everyone greeted these changes with unalloyed enthusiasm. From television's earliest days, critics warned of its potential dangers. Some worried that the medium could become a tool for propaganda, subtly shaping public opinion in ways that were difficult to detect or resist. Others fretted about the effects on children, fearing that hours spent in front of the screen would dull curiosity, stunt imagination, or promote passive consumption over active engagement with the world. The charge of anti-intellectualism was raised as well, with concerns that television's preference for entertainment and spectacle might undermine serious discussion and thoughtful analysis. Regulators, too, grappled with the power of this new medium. In 1949, the Fairness Doctrine was introduced, requiring broadcasters to provide balanced coverage of controversial issues. The goal was to ensure that television, as a medium entrusted with the public airwaves, served the democratic ideal of informed debate rather than simply catering to the lowest common denominator. In practice, the effectiveness and enforcement of the Fairness Doctrine would remain subjects of debate, but its existence spoke to the recognition that television was more than a business. It was a force with the capacity to shape the nation's conversation. Television's influence was not confined to the United States. As American programs and entertainment formats began to circulate globally, they carried with them the values, humor, and aspirations of post-war America. In living rooms from Europe to Asia, viewers encountered the world of I Love Lucy, the adventures of the American West, and the rhythms of American life as distilled through sitcoms and dramas. This spread of television helped to create a global audience for American culture, even as it sparked debates about cultural imperialism and the preservation of local traditions. The golden age of television was, by its nature, a fleeting moment. As the 1960s approached, the medium began to change. The era of live broadcast gave way to filmed and taped shows, with the network seeking greater control and efficiency. The anthology dramas that had once been the pride of television fell by the wayside, replaced by formulaic genres and programming that aimed for mass appeal rather than critical acclaim. This shift marked the beginning of what would later be called the network era, a period characterized by consolidation, standardization, and, in the eyes of some critics, a decline in artistic ambition. Still, the legacy of television's golden age endures. The innovations in storytelling, technology, and production pioneered during this period laid the groundwork for everything that followed. The sense of shared experience, the capacity for real-time connection, and the intertwining of entertainment with politics and commerce, all these features remain central to television's role in society. Looking back, it is easy to see why television so captivated the post-war imagination. It promised connection in an era of mobility and change, offering a window onto distant worlds and a mirror for the nation's dreams and dilemmas. It could comfort, amuse, provoke, and unite. For better or worse, it became the storyteller of the modern age, shaping how people saw themselves and each other, one broadcast at a time. As television continued its evolution, moving from the live drama of the 1950s to the mass-market programming of the network era, its influence only deepened. The questions raised in those early years about representation, persuasion, and the power of images would not go away. Instead, they would become the defining challenges of an age in which the glow of the television screen was never far from sight, weaving its way into the rhythms of daily life and the collective memory of generations. Picture, for a moment, the living room of the early 1970s. The television, still a heavy box with curved glass and wood veneer, dominates the space. But something is different now. Gone is the stark contrast of black and white. In its place, a world of color flickers to life. This transformation, which began in earnest in the 1950s with the adoption of the RCA system as the American color standard, took decades to become widespread. By the 1970s, however, color television sets were no longer rare, and their vivid imagery changed not just the look, but the feel of home entertainment. The arrival of color was only one part of a cascade of changes that would redefine television. As the years passed, technology introduced new possibilities at a pace that felt almost dizzying. In the 1970s and 1980s, cable television came into its own, offering audiences a much broader array of channels, sharper images, and a welcome relief from the snowy static that had plagued over-the-air broadcasts. No longer were viewers limited to just a handful of local networks. Cable expanded the menu. Sports, movies, news, and niche interests all found their own channels. For many, this was the first taste of what it meant to choose rather than simply receive their television experience. Satellite television soon followed, beaming signals to even the most remote locations and further dissolving the boundaries of access. With a simple dish, households far from cities could receive the same programming as those in urban centers, a leap forward in the democratization of television. The era of scarcity was fading, replaced by an age of abundance. Alongside these advances in content delivery, the devices themselves were evolving. The introduction of the video cassette recorder, or VCR, in the 1980s gave viewers a new sense of control. Now, families could record their favorite shows to watch at their leisure, pause for a phone call, or fast-forward through commercials. This was the first real crack in television's rigid schedule, laying the groundwork for a future in which the viewer, not the network, would set the pace. Picture quality, too, advanced steadily. The late 1990s brought the promise of high-definition television, or HDTV. For the first time, images appeared with a crispness and clarity that rivaled film. Faces, landscapes, even the spin of a ball in a sporting event, all became more lifelike and immersive. The shift from analog to digital broadcasting in the 2000s made these improvements standard rather than exceptional. With digital signals came better sound, more compact equipment, and the ability to transmit more channels over the same bandwidth. Each step forward was not just about sharper pictures or clearer sound, it was about expanding the possibilities of what television could be. Even as these technologies entered homes, a new revolution was brewing. One that would upend not just how television was delivered, but what it meant to watch TV at all. In the 2000s and 2010s, streaming platforms began to emerge. At first, they seemed like a novelty. Netflix, originally a DVD rental service by mail, launched streaming in 2007. Hulu, Disney+, Amazon Prime Video, and others soon followed, each offering vast libraries of content available at the click of a button. The most profound shift was not the sheer volume of choice, but the end of the schedule entirely. No longer did you need to tune in at a specific time. Television became something you summoned on demand, whenever and wherever you wanted. This on-demand model radically challenged the old guard of broadcast and cable television. For decades, networks had set the agenda, what aired, when, and for how long. Now, the power was shifting decisively to the viewer. Binge-watching, once unthinkable, became a common way to experience stories. New shows could be released a season at a time, encouraging deep immersion and conversation. The economics, too, began to shift. Where cable had relied on bundled packages and advertising, streaming services experimented with subscriptions, fewer advertisements, and eventually, with the rise of free ad-supported streaming television known as FAST channels, an entirely new hybrid model emerged. FAST channels, offering linear-style programming supported by advertisements, saw explosive growth. By 2025, 45% of United States internet households were watching these services. It was a sign that while viewers craved choice and convenience, many were willing to trade some autonomy for lower costs, accepting advertisements as the price of free content. Streaming services responded in kind, offering tiered models and producing original shows and movies that competed directly with the biggest studios. The very definition of television began to blur. Once, television meant the large screen in the living room. Now, it could be a smartphone, a tablet, or even a laptop. Content flowed across platforms, and short-form videos from social media creators, independent filmmakers, or brands became an increasingly important part of the landscape. What counted as TV was no longer defined by length, schedule, or even the device on which it was watched. It became a fluid, constantly evolving category. The hardware, too, kept pace with these changes. Smart televisions and connected devices became the norm, allowing viewers to access applications and content from dozens of services without ever leaving the main screen. The boundaries between television and computers faded. In many homes, the television became just another portal to the internet, capable of playing games, showing social media feeds, or streaming music. For cable and satellite providers, this new reality demanded adaptation. They began to offer smaller, more flexible packages, so-called skinny bundles, and integrated streaming applications directly into their set-top boxes. The goal was to remain relevant in a world where the old rules no longer applied. Technological progress did not stop with streaming or convenience. Picture quality continued its relentless march forward. 4K and ultra-high-definition televisions entered the market, promising images sharper than ever before. Even 8K sets, though not yet commonplace, hinted at a future where the screen might become indistinguishable from a window. Artificial intelligence entered the mix as well, offering personalized recommendations, voice control, and the potential for interactive viewing experiences that respond to the preferences and moods of the audience. For all these changes, some elements of television remained surprisingly durable. Traditional linear TV, the kind where you turn on the set and watch whatever is being broadcast at that moment, still resonated with many people. Major events, live sports, and breaking news continued to draw viewers in real time. creating shared moments that echoed the water cooler conversations of decades past. In many parts of the world, television retained its power as a tool for mass communication and cultural exchange, reaching audiences across borders and generations. Yet the overall picture was one of increasing fragmentation. With so many choices, so many channels, platforms, and creators, audiences splintered into ever smaller groups, each finding their own corner of the vast television universe. This fragmentation presented new challenges and opportunities. On one hand, it allowed for more diverse stories, tailored content, and a proliferation of voices. On the other, it made it harder for any single show or event to capture the kind of mass attention that once defined the medium. Industry dynamics shifted in response. Streaming services, flush with subscriber data, developed specialized content for targeted audiences and invested heavily in original programming. The old model of licensing reruns faded, replaced by fierce competition to produce the next must-see series or film. At the same time, the economics of streaming continued to evolve. As more platforms entered the market, the cost of subscribing to multiple services began to add up. This led some viewers to seek out free, ad-supported options and prompted companies to experiment with new bundles and pricing strategies. The rise of short-form video and creator-driven content marked another transformation. Social platforms became powerful distribution channels, and the idea of appointment television was challenged by the viral clip or trending hashtag. Young audiences, in particular, gravitated toward content that was immediate, interactive, and often created by individuals rather than traditional studios. The landscape was no longer dominated by a handful of networks or even well-funded streaming giants, but by an ever-changing mix of professionals, amateurs, and influencers. Through it all, innovation continued apace. The integration of artificial intelligence promised smarter recommendations and even the possibility of interactive storytelling, where viewers could shape the outcome of what they were watching. The convergence of broadcast, cable, and digital platforms created new ways to discover, share, and discuss content. What had begun as a technology for transmitting moving images across distance had become a sprawling, dynamic ecosystem, one that reflected not only advances in engineering, but the evolving habits, tastes, and aspirations of viewers around the globe. By May 2025, a remarkable threshold was crossed. Streaming accounted for 44.8% of all television usage in the United States, surpassing the combined share of broadcast and cable for the first time. It was a clear signal that the digital revolution, long in the making, had reached its tipping point. The future of television would be defined not by any single technology or platform, but by the ongoing interplay of innovation, audience choice, and the enduring human desire to see, hear, and share stories. As the digital era unfolds, television remains in a state of flux, its boundaries expanding, its forms multiplying, and its influence undiminished. The chapter that began with a flicker of color in a wooden box now stretches into a world where the screen is everywhere, the programming is infinite, and the viewer is, at last, firmly in control. The journey of television, from its origins and invention to its place at the center of modern digital life, is a testament to our endless appetite for connection, information, and imagination. And though no one can predict exactly where the next revolution will lead, one thing seems certain. Television, however we define it, will continue to surprise, inspire, and unite us in ways both familiar and wholly new.